Righto, so now we're going to look at a car that's probably built basically from someone's mind, their dream car. So this is going to be a controversial car. I've spoken to the owner very heavily on this one. We're building his car. We're not building my car, we're not building your car, we're not building anyone else's car. This is his car. So I'm only the tool to make it work. I've got to produce what he wants, which I'm really proud to be a part of. Now, how this car come about was Brendan decided what he wanted. He wanted a little Holden Tigra, and he wanted to make it pure muscle. You know, so he had a VF Commodore, and that's where all the components have come from, or some of the components. Now, the very first thing we did was sat down, had a coffee, and had a big long conversation of what he wants out of it. So I got a description of what we wanted. The next thing that we did was contacted an engineer, sat him down, and had a big discussion on what we could do. This is an ICV, right, individual constructor vehicle. So this here in Australia, because this will be worldwide, so this here in Australia has to be engineered and certified in a lot of different ways. So the first things that we do, get a picture in our head from the owner. The second thing is talk to an engineer. So any custom work you do with a car, whether it's a set of rear chassis rails or upgrading the brakes or upgrading the suspension, if you need an engineer's report, before you start, talk to an engineer. Get them involved in your vehicle. Get it all your name, their contact, the details of the car, get everything written down. Get it all in writing, what you can do and what you can't do. That is so, so important. We have vehicles here that someone started, they've gone and bought a heap of parts from different places in the world, and they're not certifiable in Australia. So now we have a choice of either throwing all of it out, which is quite expensive, or do we try and get it passed through certification? So we might have to get the parts drawn, tested, we might have to do physical tests on them, but this is very expensive stuff. So this is why we talk to an engineer at the start. He will tell us what we can do and what we can't do. And we don't stop talking to the engineer. The whole build, he will see this car 3 or 4 or a dozen times. So this one here is very different, right? Now this is probably as much custom as anyone will ever do. So we've started with a basic body, hardtop convertible. Being a convertible creates other problems. So part of our engineering has to be a torsion test. So they twist the car and make sure it's safe. So we've worked out how we wanted to build the chassis. Went back to the engineer and said, look, this is what I want to do. Is this okay? We've had a few issues, had to change a few tactics, done it the way he wanted it. So now we have a chassis. So we've set up the motor and gearbox, diff, put the wheels in its spot, and then started working out how we're going to make a chassis. It's quite a difficult, long process. The luxury of this personal car here is the owner doesn't really care about that stuff. He's more about the outside of it. So how we make it, it's just as long as it's safe and drivable. So he wants to drive this a lot. It's also going to be a high-end, quite show car. So at the same time, we've got to be constantly thinking about it. We always go back to the owner and say, look, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? It's conversation all the time. I might come up with an idea that the owner wants, and you guys might be talking with your chassis builder or your suspension guy. Go back to the engineer and just make sure that he can do what you want. Because though you're spending all the money in the world on a part, and then finding out that it won't work or it's not certifiable. So keep in touch with your engineer. I can't stress that enough. Find a guy that you've got a good relationship with and just constantly work with him. A lot of problems we have with this personal car, and in some customs you might not, like you might build a 49 Mercury and you want to roof chop it and things like that. Make sure the engineer's happy with what you want to do, but your headlights and that are pretty much where they're going to be. We've had to set the headlights up, so we've had to go to Vic roads because it's going to be a Victorian registered car. Make sure that we've got those headlights in the correct position, because if they're not, it won't pass. That's how simple a non-pass is. So we have to make sure that the brakes, headlights, seat belts, all of our safety is 100% perfect because there's no second go at any of that. Part of a build of this caliber is you don't get everything right the first time. So when you're talking to your builder, your panel beater, your painter, if you're doing a one-off, it's not easy. So this area here, we've probably had 2 or 3 goes at. You got to be sort of constructive with your time, but sometimes you do something and you go, oh man, that just didn't work at all. This is not everybody's cup of tea, this car, but it's a really good example of what we're trying to talk about. So some people might not like this, so we've done a front end and the owner didn't like it at all. We went, righto, that's no good, we'll try another way. We tried another way, didn't like it, fine. We're kind of going this way, which was actually my original thoughts. And we're all sort of happy with it. The owner's the one that's got to be happy with it. So when you're talking to your guys, whether it's your electrician, your painter or somebody like that, you've got to get a relationship with them and you've got to be talking to them constantly. You know, like if they've painted the car, at what level do you want it? You know, do you want it a show car that you're going to drive every day? No, because what's the point of spending all that money? You can still have the colour, you can have the effects, but it's the difference between a candy red car is sort of a blinged up car that you're not going to use every day, because if you get a stone chip or someone dings it, you've got to repaint the whole car or the whole side of the car. A car of this calibre, you can't get right the first go on every aspect. Some of it we can, some of it we can't. In this day and age, we're using a lot of 3D scanning, some printing for prototype work. The front end we've done and designed, that was scanned. We did some printing on it to make sure that it was going to work. We did a bit of a metal side of it before we spent all the money on 3D or CAD design and CAD machining, because that's where it got very expensive. So again, I can't emphasise anywhere near enough of talking to your guys or ladies. If it's a trim that you want to do and you want to do something a little bit different, they might not get it perfect the first time, but you've got to allow them a little bit of slack, where if they're trying something completely new that no one's ever done, if they get it right the first time, hey, we're on a win. If we don't get it right the first time and we've got to have a second go at it and finish it off, well, that's all good. So on a car like this, again, safety. We've got to make sure the car's safety. We've got to make sure that it's a registerable car, unless he wants a car that's never going to be registered. It might be a buggy or a stand buggy or something like that, or it might be just a pure show car that he only wants to put on show. But again, if you're going to build a show car, are you taking it to shows that need to be registered? Are you taking it to shows that doesn't need to be registered? Does it have to be driven into those shows? Make sure that you understand what your car's going to do when you're finished with it. Because no use building a car and taking it somewhere and finding out that it's got to be registered, or finding out you don't need it registered. So there's a whole heap of money you can save by doing that. Be realistic. While custom cars like this are slow, they're time consuming, we do the best we can to help them, but at the same time, they've got to understand that we can't get it right the first time, and no one can. You know, like there's plenty of guys out there with social media and it's, oh wow, how good does this look? But with the magazine, we're trying to explain to you, we don't get it right the first time all the time. We're trying to make it so as you understand that the only thing we're going to get right the first time is the registration side of it. We've got to get that right, but all the little components are going to take time, you know. So some cars we have pollution issues, some cars we have noise, some cars we have wheel diameter. But the main thing we want to get across is, before you start anything, whether it's you bought a car and you just want to register in your name, the first thing you do in there is going to get a roadworthy. The first thing on a custom car is talk to your engineer, and it could be just as much as putting a V8 where a 6-cylinder come from. Talk to the engineer. Start at your starting points. Don't paint the car, then go back and get a different engine fitted, change the brakes, because then you're you guys have got to work around your paint job. Your paint job's kind of the last thing. You know, get all your mechanical done, then paint it. Don't waste your money by painting it, then get someone to fit a V8 to it or a 6-cylinder or a turbo engine or something, and then expect them to work over your brand new paint job without marking it, because it's really, really hard. So just get a bit of a plan, and like I said, write down what you want from the start to the finish. The first thing is, do you want it registered, or do you want to just show car, or do you want it just a race car? And then work out the process from there on in.